Welcome to Delighting in the Trinity with Michael Reeves, brought to you by Union. This podcast brings you teaching and preaching from our archives, and you can find more resources, audio, video and books at unionpublishing.org.
No story of the church would be quite complete without some time spent with the mighty Augustine, 354 to 430 AD. Now, Augustine, he was born and he spent most of his life in what today is Tunisia and Algeria. This was a provincial backwater of the Roman Empire. But Augustine would be perhaps the most influential Christian in the history of the church after the apostles. Here are the opening words of his most deservedly famous work, the Confessions. Now hear his heartbeat. He prays to God. Great are you, O Lord, greatly to be praised. Great is your power, of your wisdom there is no end. You arouse us to delight in praising you, for you have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they find their rest in you. And the Confessions, Augustine's testimony, reveals that Augustine's life was one long search for happiness. That's how it was for him. That's how it is for all of us. And that is a right search. But before he came to Christ, Augustine spent all his life looking in all the wrong places for satisfaction, for happiness, for pleasure. Here's how he characterized his youth. He said to God, I abandoned you to pursue the lowest things of your creation. I was dust going to dust. Now notice what he's saying there. He's saying we become like what we love. And so pursuing dirty things, he was becoming dirt. One of his most powerful illustrations of looking in the wrong place comes in the story of his friend Alypius. Now, Alypius hated the gladiatorial combats that were so popular then, and to understand them, we should think of them really as the ancient equivalent of pornography and love of extreme violence in films. Well, Alypius didn't like going to the gladiatorial shows, but Augustine says some of his friends used friendly violence to take him. When they arrived and had found seats where they could, the entire place seethed with the most monstrous cruelty and delight in the cruelty. Alypius kept his eyes shut and forbade his mind to think about such fearful evils. And Augustine writes, would that he had blocked his ears as well. A man fell in combat, and a great roar from the entire crowd struck him with such vehemence, he was overcome with curiosity. He opened his eyes. The shouting entered by his ears and forced open his eyes. And as soon as he saw the blood, he at once drank in savagery and did not turn away. His eyes were riveted. He imbibed madness. Without any awareness of what was happening to him, says Augustine, he found now delight in the murderous contest and was inebriated by a bloodthirsty pleasure. he was not now the same person who had come in. He took the madness home with him so that it urged him to return. What you look at will change you. It will stamp itself upon your character and mold you into its image. Well then, as the Confessions moves on, we move through Augustine's life, the Confessions becomes more and more breathless as that search for joy becomes more and more desperate for Augustine. And recalling it, Augustine prayed. He said, "O Lord, I was caught up to you by your beauty and quickly torn away from you by my weight. With a groan, I crashed into inferior things. This weight was my sexual habit. And yet, with me, there remained a memory of you." And you see then that his story, which is our story, is a love story. It's a battle of desires. It's a story of love turning. And the climactic moment happened when he was walking in a garden in Milan, North Italy, when he heard a voice saying, "Tole, lege," take, read. And whatever that voice was, he took it as a divine command to open the book of Romans, which he had with him. And his eyes fell on Romans 13, verses 13 and 14. Not in orgies and drunkenness, not in sexual immorality and sensuality, not in quarreling and jealousy. Put on the Lord Jesus Christ. And with that, Augustine understood for the first time Christ was the satisfaction he had been chasing all along. Suddenly, he said, it had become sweet to me to be without the sweets of sin. And what I once feared to lose there was now a delight to dismiss. You, Lord, entered in to take their place, pleasanter than any pleasure. And that discovery would shape all his thinking as a Christian and as a theologian serving the church. Now, perhaps Augustine's greatest work as a theologian was to counter the work of Pelagius. Against Pelagius, Augustine showed Christians are meant to find joy in an all-glorious God. So who was Pelagius? Pelagius was a British monk who taught that each person has the responsibility and the potential to be morally perfect. Such is God's command. And so said Pelagius, God would not command what is impossible. No, he said, we in fact were all born in the same state as Adam before the fall. We were all born innocent, he said. And that being so, we all face a simple choice from a neutral position. We can choose to copy Adam, sin, and so be damned. Or we have the equal opportunity to choose to copy Christ and so be saved. And that, he explained, is why God gave the law, so that through obeying it, we might achieve perfection and bring back paradise on earth. A self-help theology. No wonder it was popular. But actually, it made chilling claims. For Pelagius, God is not glorious and gracious. He's not glorious in his graciousness, for he's not gracious at all. For Pelagius, everything is left down to us to achieve. We each must achieve perfection. And so Pelagius placed a crushing weight of responsibility on the individual. We must all ourselves achieve our own personal perfection if we are to have life. Now, Augustine realized that for all the Christian language that Pelagius used, he had fundamentally misunderstood the nature of God and the gospel. Pelagius was teaching that we've done wrong things. That's the real problem. But that if we are to enter heaven, the solution is start doing right things. And it does not seem to have properly been worked through in Pelagius' mind. We were created to know and love God. And thus, for Pelagius, the aim of the Christian life was not to enjoy God, but to use him as the one who sells us heaven for the price of being moral. How differently Augustine saw things. Augustine held we were not created simply to live under God's moral code. We were made to find our rest and satisfaction in God's all-satisfying fellowship, and therefore, and only therefore, walk in his ways. Augustine defined true love as the enjoyment of God for his own sake. For he said, God is an insatiable satisfaction, sweeter than all pleasure. And thus we love him, longing to be rewarded with him. Moreover, our problem is not so much that we've behaved wrongly. Our problem goes far deeper than that. It is that we've been drawn to love wrongly. Made in the image of the God of love, Augustine argued we are always motivated by love. And that's exactly what went wrong in Genesis 3. Adam and Eve disobeyed God. They sinned because they loved something else more than they loved God. And that means that merely altering our superficial behavior is not going to sort us out. It will do us no good. Something much more profound is needed. Our hearts need to be won back. More than anything, Augustine saw we need to see the glory of God, to taste how delightful God is. For he has made us for himself, and our hearts will always be restless until they find their rest in him.
You've been listening to Delighting in the Trinity with Michael Reeves, brought to you by Union. Union is devoted to growing leaders and growing churches. Our School of Theology equips leaders for ministry. Union Publishing supplies them and their churches with quality theological resources and books. Union Mission supports and financially helps church planting and revitalisation. And Newton House, Oxford, invests in the next generation of theologians and scholars. Our vision is to see leaders and their churches the world over reformed and renewed in the gospel of Jesus Christ. To find out about our courses and learning communities around the world, to buy Union books, to discover support for your church plant, or to become a friend of Union and support our ministry, visit www.theology.org. theola.gy.